like the covenant I made before. I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and I will remember their sin no more. I'll forgive their iniquity and cleanse them from sin, and each man will carry my law within. I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and I will remember their sin no more. I will forgive their iniquity. I will forgive their iniquity. The days are surely coming when I'll make a new covenant, not like the covenant I made before. I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and I will remember their sin no more. I'll forgive their iniquity and cleanse them from sin, and each man will carry my law within. I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and I will remember their sin no more. I will remember their sin no more.
2 more weeks till Easter. 2 more weeks of wilderness time. 2 more weeks of exploring that inner life, calming our busy little brains, and reestablishing that all-important relationship that we have with God. One of the things that we talk about during the Lenten season is the idea of covenant. That's actually been the theme of our Wednesday night ecumenical services over at the Lutheran Church. This idea of covenant, which is basically an agreement between 2 parties. It's a declaration of partnership. Or to put it as simply as I can, it's here's how we're going to work with each other. I will do X if you will do Y. Or you will do X and I will do Y. It's like a contract. And it's funny because some people really misunderstand this concept of covenant, because some people think that it's just a list of rules. And if you were to receive the registration packet for the Regions camping program, I can see where that might be the case, because what happens is you have a thing there, it's called a behavior covenant, and what it looks like is it's just a list of rules. And that's not what it is. That's not the case. Because at camp, everyone signs the behavior covenant. You might think, well, what kind of a difference does that make? Well, let me explain it to you. We don't just have a list of rules and then say, if you break one of these rules, you get sent home. The covenant is a contract that lists the expectations both of the campers and the adult leaders, the counselors, the directors. And it usually goes like this. This is what we expect of both campers and adult leaders and staff. No drugs, no weapons, no abusive language, treat each other with kindness and respect, participate in everything, and be present. If you can't do those things, maybe camp isn't for you. Maybe camp isn't your thing. But if you decide camp is your thing, and you think that you can abide by these guidelines, then welcome aboard. Welcome to camp. Just realize that if you break that agreement during the week, you will be asked to go home. Campers have to sign it, and adults have to sign it. I have to sign it. I'm co-directing CYF camp this year, and I have to sign it. And if you think that's messed up, Katie is the chaplain, and so as the pastor of this church, I have to sign her behavior covenant too, because as a pastor, I'm supposed to endorse her and say that she understands this covenantal relationship. I'm signing so many, and then I'm signing my own kids, and because I'm the parent and the pastor, and Katie signed. There's a lot of signatures that are going on with this, and that's the difference that it makes. See the difference between here are the rules, obey them, and a covenant. But let me tell you, obey or else is sure a heck of a lot easier way to run a camp. Believe me. And why is that? Well, because obey or else gives you a lot more control over people. Okay? Back in the ancient world, obey or else is how the people understood the role of the gods. Here's an example. Let's talk about Marduk, the patron god of the Babylonian Empire. Marduk was the god of storms. And he destroyed Tiamat, who was the goddess of chaos. During his battle with her, she opened her mouth, and he had this multicolored bow, and he took that multicolored bow and he shot an arrow down her mouth, and it obliterated her. It just destroyed her. And then he used her corpse to form the land. That's what happens to people who mess with Marduk. You mess with Marduk, you get obliterated with an arrow. Marduk's job is to bring order to chaos by force. So the kings and the armies of Babylon understand themselves to be the agents or representatives of Marduk. Their job was to bring order to chaos. And anyone who gets in the way of that arrow, or anybody who gets in the way of the Babylonian Empire, they get the arrow. And you know what happens when you get the arrow? You get obliterated. See that mountain range over there? That's what's left of Tiamat. Do you want that? Oh. In fact, every time you see a rainbow in the sky after a storm, that's Marduk's way of saying, remember what happened to Tiamat. That's what can happen to you too. That's not a covenant. That is not an agreement between two parties. You either submit to Marduk's empire or you are obliterated. So imagine how weird it must have seemed to the people of the ancient Middle Eastern world when they learned that the God of the Hebrew people reclaimed and repurposed and redefined the rainbow. Because according to the covenant that God made with Noah, the rainbow was a sign that God would never destroy God's people. The rainbow wasn't seen as this visible sign of a storm god's threat, but a sign of peaceful security that everything was going to be calm and everything was going to be all right. God made all sorts of covenants with the Hebrew people. There was the covenant of creation, there was the rainbow covenant with Noah, there was the covenant with Moses, with the 10 Commandments that came along with it. There was the covenant of King David, and it went on and on. So many different covenants in the Old Testament. And then there's this one here in Jeremiah that Lemoyne read. Why do you suppose there were so many covenants in the Old Testament?
They had a House of Representatives, the Senate.
No, but think about it. You would think that the 10 Commandment one would be good enough. You'd think that. Why were there so many?
Because the people kept screwing up.
Yes, the people kept messing it up.
Be sent home. They kept being sent home, right?
Yeah, they got sent home from camp. Well, the thing is they were not holding up their part of the bargain. God was holding up God's part of the bargain. They were not holding up their part of the bargain. Because the people didn't live up to their agreement, because when you look at all these different covenants, okay, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and be good stewards of the earth. Oops, we messed that one up. Okay. I'll be your God, and you are going to be my people, and if you are faithful, you'll go out and be the father of many nations, and just do good. Oops, blew that one. All right, so you all want a king. I don't think that's a very good idea, but if you want a king, fine. But here is the agreement that we're going to work by. Oh, we screwed that one up too. Daggone. Here's the thing though. God kept renegotiating these agreements. Marduk would have just taken people out. Mowed them down like a 6-year-old with a weed eater. Just, that's what Marduk would have done. Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, the great I Am, the one whose desire is to work in partnership with creation, kept saying, all right, let's try again. Frustrated the heck out of some people. See, my untamed imagination can come up with all sorts of ways to get people to do what I want them to do out of fear. I mean, who in their right mind could even imagine what a 6-year-old could do with a weed eater? That's how twisted I am, Aren't you glad that I follow Jesus? But all joking aside, one should never underestimate what someone would be willing to do if they were truly afraid, if they were terrified of the consequences. And that's what worked for Babylon. It worked for Babylon. By claiming Marduk as their patron god, they could get away with all sorts of horrible things. And they must have thought that the Hebrew people were weak fools. Because who follows a God that keeps renegotiating things when people mess up? And yet, here, in the midst of their captivity in Babylon, right here in the homeland of the minions of Marduk, the merciless God of storms who's going to, wipe you out, God makes yet another covenant with the people. As God spoke through the prophet Jeremiah, God assured the people that this wasn't going to be like any other covenant that God had made in the past. This is a new covenant. This time, God's end of the agreement says, I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Nobody's going to have to say to each other, oh, know the Lord, because they're going to know that already. They will know God already. And best of all, God will forgive them for all the times that they have messed up in the past and all of the times that they messed up now. God will forget the people's sins as if they had never even happened. The Babylonians, they followed their God out of fear. The displaced, disheartened, disassembled people of Israel, they follow their God because God first loved them and they loved God. Even when they're at their worst, God loved them. And the way this all works is that God will put the law within them and write it on their hearts. So here's the million-dollar question this morning. What in the world does it mean when something is written on a person's heart? Some of us have things written on our skin. Some of us have parts and machines in our actual hearts that keep them beating all right and everything. But I don't think that's what the author meant here about having something written on your heart. What do you think having something written on your heart means? Yeah.
Commitment to your faith.
Okay, all right. Any other things that you can think of? What does it mean to have something written on your heart?
Naturally compassionate.
Yeah, comes naturally. Yeah, okay.
I keep thinking, cross my heart and hope to die.
Yeah, kind of weird about it. Then the stick a needle in
Stick
the
a
eye
needle in my
afterwards
eye.
is kind of a little. That's more Mardukish than it is Yahweh-ish, but you know. In our house, we have this little plaque here. It's called the Family Rules, and we have it posted right. When you have 3 boys, you put it up by the pantry because the boys are always getting something to eat in the pantry. So we have this family rules that are posted in our house. Yes, they're posted to remind us, but the hope is that these rules are written on our hearts so that when we run into certain situations or potential conflicts or something like that, we can look at this and say, always be grateful, keep your promises, be happy, say I love you. Well, of course we do. That's what we do. That's what we are. You know, we look at that and say, well, yeah, this is a no-brainer. This is what we do. This is what we represent as a family. This is what we do.
Looks like you can firmly affix it to the wall too there.
Yes, multiple times. So when they're wrestling and beating each other up in the kitchen, it won't come up. When they're loving each other and being dependable, they can do that. But when something is written on a person's heart, it's something that is organic, natural, like you say. And in the case of this new covenant, what will be written on the hearts of the people of Israel is the foundation of a relationship that is not based on fear or obedience, but on love and trust. And you might be saying, oh, yeah, right, Jesse, that's great and fine, but you know how trustworthy people are, as in not at all. Always flaking out because we're so faithless. This is just unrealistic. No covenant is going to change that part of us. And you know what's funny is some of the commentators and scholars that I read in this last week in preparing for this sermon, that's exactly what they said too. They're like, oh, well, you know, this passage is just some unrealistic utopian insert added to Jeremiah's writing by some over-enthusiastic scribe 100 years after Jeremiah was even around. But then there are others who say that this is the high point. This covenant is the high point of the Old Testament, and that it's the most important statement in the Hebrew Scriptures of the nature of the gospel that was fulfilled in Jesus. And you know what? I could honestly give a rip about who wrote it, because I think it's pretty obvious that Jesus filled this role and is the embodiment of this new covenant. And think about what we do every week at the table, okay? We remember, it says, do this in remembrance of me. Remember what? What Jesus did. Jesus took a cup, which was the visible sign of the covenant with Moses, that Passover meal, that covenant with Moses. And he transformed that old symbol into a new symbol of God's saving love. Christ is present with us when we eat the bread and when we drink the cup of this new covenant. Christ is present even as we rejoice that God will forgive our past wrongs and forgive our current sins. We come to Christ's table to know the presence of Christ and to be united with all whom God gathers into this new covenant, this new agreement. Would you pray with me?